up today, South Korea's Prime Minister reiterates the government's position that the recent decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system here does not need Parliament's seal of approval. An international panel rules against Chinese claims to rights in the South China Sea and finds they violated the Philippines' maritime rights. Beijing calls the ruling ill-founded. Plus, US President Barack Obama pays tribute to the 5 police officers killed in Dallas. He says Americans must open their hearts to each other to overcome racial divisions. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world at 6 a.m. on Wednesday, July 13th here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this morning, the South Korean government has reaffirmed its position that the recent decision to deploy a US missile defense system to the Korean peninsula does not require parliamentary approval. The Prime Minister's comments Tuesday came as the National Assembly's Special Committee on Budget and Accounts reviewed last year's government spending. For a look at both, our Shin Se-min reports.
Lawmakers from the ruling and opposition parties questioned related government officials on a wide range of issues, from local affairs like rewriting the nation's history textbooks to discussing the aftermath of deploying the U.S. missile defense system THAAD. The comprehensive Q&A session went on for hours. One of the main talking points was the economy. Finance Minister Yoo Il-ho said without the supplementary budget, Korea's economic growth rate will drop to about 2.5%, urging the lawmakers to swiftly approve the extra budget plan worth nearly $8.7 billion once submitted to the parliament. Yoo took the example of last year's supplementary budget, which he said was instrumental in pushing up the growth rate for about 0.2 percentage points. Last year, Korea posted a growth rate of 2.6%, shy of its initial goal of 3.1%. The finance minister added that this year's extra budget is necessary in preemptively countering potential fallouts from the ongoing corporate restructuring efforts and the UK's divorce from the European Union, among other looming risks from home and abroad. Also taking the spotlight was the recent decision on deploying a U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula. Defense Minister Han Min-gu said the looming concerns coming from nearby countries, namely China and Russia, over the THAAD deployment are seen excessive. Regarding the issue, Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se and Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-wan said that the Korean government has discussed the issue of deploying THAAD with neighboring countries through different channels thoroughly, adding that although the Defense Ministry has yet to officially announce the location of where THAAD will be stationed, Han said the missile defense system will be placed in a high altitude and a mountainous terrain in the country. The comprehensive questioning session will continue throughout this week until Friday. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States says North Korea's aggressive rhetoric on the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to South Korea shows the decision was justified. Washington also called for the release of American detainees in the north after Pyongyang threatened to handle them in accordance with the wartime law. Kwon So-ah reports.
The United States says North Korea's threat to take physical action in retaliation for the deployment of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD proves the decision was right. Pentagon spokesman Commander Gary Ross said such threats only confirm the prudence of Seoul and Washington's decision, adding that the U.S. will continue to ensure its defense posture remains capable of deterring conflict and defending the U.S. and its armed forces. Washington also reacted to another threat made by North Korea late on Monday when it vowed to shut off all channels of contact with the U.S. and deal with any Americans detained in the country according to wartime law. The U.S. State Department once again called on North Korea to release the detainees from improper and unjust detention. Two American citizens, college student Otto Warmbier and Korean-American pastor Kim Dong-chol, are currently detained in North Korea with sentences of 15 and 10 years. Spokesman John Kirby said all of North Korea's recent threats, whether in the form of words or actions, are all the more reason for a proper readiness posture in South Korea. He did not, however, make any direct comments on the North's decision to sever the so-called New York Channel, the only line of communication between the U.S. and North Korea, which have no diplomatic ties. Seoul's foreign ministry also refrained from comment and instead reiterated its call for North Korea to stop its provocations.
We urge North Korea to turn its ear to the demands of the international community and quickly improve its human rights.
A week ago, the U.S. for the first time ever slapped sanctions on North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for his human rights abuses. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
The South Korean government says China and Russia's opposition to the THAAD deployment will not affect their implementation of the UN sanctions on North Korea. Seoul's foreign ministry says Beijing and Moscow, as permanent members of the UN Security Council, have given their word on numerous occasions regarding their efforts to sanction the reclusive regime for its nuclear and missile tests. A ministry spokesperson highlighted their cooperation on the sanctions will continue and even grow stronger regardless of the THAAD issue. A North Korea expert in the United States has warned that Pyongyang could launch provocations, including covert attacks inside South Korea next month, in protest of planned South Korea-U.S. joint military exercises. Ken Gores, who is a senior North Korea analyst at CNA Corporation in Washington, says the North is angry with the recently announced U.S. sanctions on leader Kim Jong-un, as well as the decision to deploy the THAAD missile defense system to South Korea. The expert said that the exercises will give Pyongyang justification to act out. On a related note, Victor Cha, chief Korea analyst at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, he said North Korea's decision to totally cut communication links with Washington could be a dangerous situation, considering those exercises and the U.S. presidential election in November. Cha said Pyongyang likes to launch provocations and spark crises around the time of U.S. elections. President Park Geun-hye will travel to Mongolia on Thursday. She has a jam-packed schedule, including the ASEM summit and a one-on-one with her Mongolian counterpart. For more on the president's itinerary, Song Ji-sun reports.
Mongolia's GDP is only 1% of Korea's at just $12 billion US. But the country's connection with Seoul is stronger than its economy of scale. Korea is Mongolia's fourth largest trade partner, and 1% of its population, or 30,000 Mongolians, live in Korean cities. A separate 12,000 Mongolians visit Korea for medical treatment each year, making Mongolia Korea's fifth largest market for medical tourism. President Park Geun-hye's summit with Mongolian President Chahia El-Dorj will be focused on upgrading their comprehensive partnership in a mutually beneficial way.
Seoul will seek to take greater part in Mongolia's infrastructure projects while seeking cooperation in developing renewable energy and resources. As most of Mongolia's health facilities are located in the capital of Ulaanbaatar, there's great demand for Seoul's telemedicine technologies.
During her trip, President Park will also attend a business forum and a one-on-one consultation to help Korean companies land contracts with local buyers. The president will be accompanied by a large delegation of business leaders, including smaller companies based in regions, as well as startups nurtured through Korea's innovation centers. Seoul sees Ulaanbaatar as a prospective niche market with a greater room for growth in trade and investment, especially on the back of the ever-growing popularity of Hallyu, or the Korean wave, in Mongolia. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Now, an international court in The Hague has sided with the Philippines, overruling Beijing's claims in the South China Sea. For more on that and China's angry response, Ji Myung-gil reports.
The Permanent Court of Arbitration based in The Hague ruled in favor of the Philippines and concluded that China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to resources within the South China Sea. The Philippines welcomed the landmark decision.
The Philippines strongly affirms its respect for this milestone decision as an important contribution to ongoing efforts in addressing disputes in the South China Sea.
China published a map in 1947 which outlined its claims to the South China Sea, the basis of its so-called Nine-Dash Line, stretching 3.5 million square kilometers from China's southern coast. The arbitration court said China had interfered with traditional Philippine fishing rights at Scarborough Shoal and breached the Philippines' sovereign rights by exploring for oil and gas near the Reed Bank. But China refuses to acknowledge the tribunal's ruling.
I should say the so-called arbitral tribunal was based on the illegal action and claim of the Philippines from the very onset, so its very existence is not legitimate.
Manila asked the court to mediate on the rights it has to the disputed waters under the United Nations Conventions on Law of the Sea in 2013. Experts said the ruling will have deep implications.
This is an absolutely huge decision. It doesn't come as a complete surprise, but to have the International Court rule on the illegitimacy of the nine-dotted line is a huge development.
Although the International Tribunal ruled in favor of the Philippines, the court has no mechanism to enforce the decision, be it through military action or economic sanctions. But analysts predict the ruling could prompt other neighboring countries like Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Brunei to file similar claims, putting increased diplomatic pressure on Beijing to reduce its presence in the South China Sea. Kim Young-git, Arirang News.
U.S. President Barack Obama has been paying his respects to the 5 police officers slain in an ambush in Dallas last week. Calling the mass shooting an act of racial hatred, Obama praised the police for protecting and serving the people and for their courage. He told the congregation that the U.S. must try to find some meaning amid the sorrow and unite. Obama said the events of the past week, which included the shootings of 2 black men by police officers, appear to have revealed the deepest fault line in the country's democracy. Despite that, he insisted that America is not as divided as it seems. Former President George W. Bush also delivered some remarks. He said no one could be prepared for an ambush driven by such hatred and malice. He said the U.S. needs to remember its common values and come together. Staying in the United States, Bernie Sanders has officially endorsed his former rival Hillary Clinton for president. In a show of party unity on Tuesday, Sanders said Clinton was the best candidate to fix the country's problems and beat Donald Trump in the November 8th election. Speaking in New Hampshire, Sanders said Clinton would take up the fight to ease economic inequality, make college more affordable, and expand health care coverage for all Americans. He said he intended to do everything he could to make certain Clinton will be the next president of the United States. Responding to the endorsement, the Trump campaign said Sanders was now officially part of the rigged system he had criticized during his long primary battle with Clinton. Now, the effects of climate change are being felt in many parts of our lives, no matter where we live. And our Iji-won shows us how people in various industries in Korea are coming up with ways to either better adjust to the change or maintain what's left.
Extreme weather events have been striking all across the globe, and scientists are making stronger links between climate change, global warming, and extreme weather. But its impacts don't end there. Climate change has important implications for nearly every aspect of life on Earth.
Climate change coming from global warming is expected to have a serious impact on the biodiversity of the ecosystem. Extreme weather conditions such as flood and drought are also increasing.
Korea's Rural Development Administration predicts rising temperatures will contribute to a roughly 14% drop in rice production by 2040 and about 40% by 2090. Korean farmers and rural organizations have been adjusting to the changes through research on different kinds of grains and inventing new methods of transplantation and fertilization.
The climate in the southern region is changing to that of the subtropics. Different types of rice that can be harvested within 9 to 10 days were recently developed as well.
The average temperature of the seawater around the Korean peninsula has been rising in the last few decades, increasing 1.2 degrees Celsius in the span of 46 years. A change of a single degree in seawater corresponds to a difference of 10 degrees on Earth. Harvesting seaweed usually takes place in the winter, but warmer seawater has created an unfavorable environment. Between 1997 and 2004, roughly 2,400 hectares of seaweed culture area disappeared. Marine institutes and government organizations have been making various efforts, such as releasing fish eggs and imposing restrictions on catch to bring back the pollock population. But some experts say there is only so much humans can do to minimize the impact of climate change.
Climate change is something that is happening on a global scale, and the variables humans can control to minimize the effects of it on the sea are so small. We can only study how marine organisms respond to such changes.
Climate change is a global problem that concerns every nation, region, and individual, and its impacts becoming more profound and pronounced in our daily lives, industries, on our dinner tables. 이지원, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Wednesday morning here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you as always for watching. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Our next bulletin coming up at 10 a.m. Korea time. So until then, goodbye.